we are all in this together. Imagine if the following was currently happening to people of your race.
In 2007, Live Action Films of California conducted an undercover investigation of Planned Parenthood offices in several states. Under the direction of the organization's president, Lila Rose, the goal of the project was to determine whether Planned Parenthood officials would accept financial donations on the condition that the money would only be used to eliminate African Americans. The following clips are from the actual recordings of those conversations.
When I underwrite abortion, does that apply to minorities too?
If you specifically want it to underwrite an abortion for a minority person, you can target it that way. You can specify that that's how you want it spent.
Okay, yeah, because there's definitely way too many black people in Ohio, so I'm just trying to do my part.
Okay, whatever.
Well, blacks especially need abortions too, so that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, for whatever reason, we'll accept the money.
So the abortion could be, I could give money specifically for a black baby. That'd be the purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. If you wanted to designate that you wanted your gift to be used to help an African American woman in need, then we would certainly make sure that gift was earmarked specifically for that purpose.
Great, because I really face trouble with affirmative action, and I don't want my kids being disadvantaged, against black kids. I just had a baby. I want to put it in his name, So that's definitely possible.
Oh, always.
So would it be possible for me to donate that money specifically for these minority groups so that they could have access to abortions?
Yes, it would be.
Wonderful. And could I specify that abortion be done, or those abortions be done for a particular minority group, or how does that work?
If you wish, you can.
Okay. So for example, the black community in Tulsa, because I have connections with that, would it be possible to give the money specifically for that?
You sure can.
Wonderful. Great. So can I give you my credit card number?
Yes.
Wonderful. Just one more thing. The abortions will be done specifically for the black community abortions.
I will mark it in such a way that definitely it will.
Oh, great. On a black baby.
Yes.
Thank you. Great.
The exact amount we charge right now is $450 for an abortion.
Okay, $450.
And we can definitely designate it for an African American.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, and if I want to make to fund, because this is if I wanted to help fund multiple abortions, could you also specify that this could be done for a specific group? Well, I'm really excited, because I really face trouble with affirmative action. I don't want my kids to be disadvantaged, against blacks in college, and the less blacks out there, the better. So.
Yeah, it's a strange time for sure.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, thank you very much, Jeremy. And if you have any questions, please feel free to give me a call. My extension is 304.
When this material was released to the public, Planned Parenthood's defense was to claim that the employees who made these statements were not reflecting the organization's corporate position. But in 1986, Planned Parenthood's national president, Faye Wattleton, made the following statement during an interview on CNN.
As a matter of fact, Mr. Dornan, if I may finish, we have received contributions from people who want to support us because they want all welfare mothers and all black women to stop having children.
Former PPFA President Faye Wattleton admitted in this 1986 national TV interview on CNN that there was, in fact, an anti-minority agenda. Despite being a minority and having knowledge of this anti-minority agenda within Planned Parenthood, she continued her presidency of the organization until 1992. One must assume she was compensated generously to overlook such an atrocity. Dating back to the days of Margaret Sanger, presidents of PPFA have promoted the eugenics-based driving principles behind the organization by falsely championing women's health. The organization is intentionally positioned so that in order to attack the inherent evil of its eugenic nature, you must also strike a blow to a woman's perceived right to have an abortion on demand. This false yet jealously defended argument is used to militantly deter any potential threat to the eugenics movement. Shamefully concealed by way of their positively spun protecting women's rights argument, PPFA has usurped control of the language of the argument, enabling them to assert the moral high ground. This allows the social elite to continue their depopulation of what they consider to be the undesirable element of humanity. Now, let's take a closer look at some of the history behind the eugenics movement.
Eugenics, the social movement claiming to improve the genetic features of human populations through selective breeding and sterilization, based on the idea that it is possible to distinguish between superior and inferior elements of society.
Somebody came to me and said there's some sterilization going on of Indian women. I publicized it, I had hearings on it.
Can you remember what the findings were?
The findings were that there was indeed sterilization going on.
Based on the documents that were secured by virtue of the illegal acts of the American Indian movement, Women of All Red Nations warned that organization analyzed the documents, and they concluded on the basis of the evidence they had that it was about 42% of the overall female population of childbearing age were prevented from birth. Not only involuntarily, but in a number of cases unwittingly. They were never even informed.
It used to be routine practice to try to sterilize Indian women after they had a very small number of children.
I mean, I don't even know how to describe how vile that was. Just absolutely incomprehensibly inhumane, and done as a matter of course.
I do not join in the belief that the African is our equal in brain or in heart. And I believe that if we can, in any fair way, possess ourselves of his services, we have an equal right to utilize them to our advantage. Francis Galton, 1857.
Francis Galton is known as the father of eugenics. He actually coined the phrase eugenics. So he believed in trying to increase those he felt were superior in stock and decrease those he felt were inferior. Francis Galton came from a very wealthy family, a family that made its wealth from the slave trade. And what a lot of people don't know is that Francis Galton was a cousin to Charles Darwin. Francis Galton took Charles Darwin's philosophies and ideas and thoughts, and he actually put them into practice, and that's what we know today as eugenics. Eugenics and evolution are related in that they both see what they consider to be the highest form of primate, such as the gorilla, as almost indistinguishable from what they consider the lowest form of human, the African and the Aborigine.
At some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. The break between man and his nearest allies will then be wider, for it will intervene between man and a more civilized state, and some ape as low as a baboon instead of as now between the Negro or Australian and the gorilla. Charles Darwin, 1890.
Charles Darwin is very well known for writing The Origin of Species in the 1800s. This book gave rise to evolutionary theory. What people don't know is that there was actually a longer original title to this book, and that was On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. Now, copies and editions that they made afterwards eliminated that phrase about the favored races. Evidently, they understood then that it was politically incorrect.
Some may defend Francis Galton because eventually that he rejected slavery, but they do point out that all of his wealth did derive from the slave trade, but also it needs to be known that he, as well as other eugenists, did not reject slavery until after it had ended, and they could not any longer exploit blacks legally. So at that point, it would have been quite easy for he and his cohorts to reject slavery. I think this is a point that we all have to really realize, that the eugenics movement was not invented by the everyday average white American, but by a select group of wealthy white elitists.
The wealthy elitists are intent on polarizing white America versus black America. The ruling elite promote infighting to keep the masses duly distracted in order to further their eugenics-based New World Order. The following audio clip illustrates how the ruling elite view us as an inferior class that should not even be allowed to reproduce.
The speakers are the President of the United States, Republican Richard Nixon, and members of his senior staff.
A majority of people in Colorado voted for abortion. I think a majority of people in Michigan voted for abortion. I think in both cases, well, certainly in Michigan, they will vote for it because they think that what's going to be aborted generally are the little black bastards. As I told you, we talked about it earlier, that a hell of a lot of people want to control the Negro bastard. Yeah. Isn't that really true? Well, we know what we're talking about, population control. Sure. We're talking really, and what John Rockefeller realizes, the people in what we call our class control their populations. Sometimes they'll have a family of 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, but it's exception. The people who don't control their families are people in the people that shouldn't have kids. Now that's the black population. Black in the city of San Francisco has gone from 3,000 right after World War II to where they represent 30% of the population of San Francisco. That's it.
The attitudes of the elite have not changed in the years since the Nixon era. In this next segment, George W. Bush wastes few words joking about his elitist base. After all, there is humor in truth.
This is an impressive crowd, the haves and the have-mores. Some people call you the elite. I call you my base.
In the early 20th century, the white elitists who made up the eugenics movement were no longer just philosophers and academics. Now they were industrialists and billionaires who had come to embrace a worldview that was essentially identical to the eugenics movement. The same individuals and corporations who had once made millions on the backs of slaves were now willing to spend millions to get rid of them. But that didn't mean that these guys were interested in being public crusaders for the eugenics movement. They were certainly willing to be the brains and the money behind it, but they would hire crusaders to do the dirty work. And the primary one they settled upon was a woman named Margaret Sanger. She was the founder of the American Birth Control League and the publisher of its newsletter, the Birth Control Review. On a practical level, the relationship between Sanger and these elitists was basically a marriage of convenience. In order to advance their common agendas, they needed a front man and she needed money. And the whole thing would be held together by this kind of bizarre obsession with race and class. The result was that the American Birth Control League became the driving force behind the American eugenics movement. Eugenics would no longer just be a philosophy. Sanger and others like her were going to put it into practice.
We are paying for and even submitting to the dictates of an ever-increasing, unceasingly spawning class of human beings who never should have been born at all. Margaret Sanger, 1922.
A commonly shared eugenic philosophy is that the lesser classes of our species are inherently unfit, feeble-minded, nervous, poor, and generally of poor genetic stock.
Do you believe in sin? When I say believe, I don't mean to believe in committing sin. Do you believe there is such a thing as sin?
Well, I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being, practically. Delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things just marked when they're born. That, to me, is the greatest sin that people can commit.
But sin in the ordinary sense that we regard it, do you believe or do you not believe?
Well, what? What would they be?
Do you believe that infidelity is a sin?
Well, I'm not going to specify what I think is sin. I've stated what I think is the worst sin.
Margaret Sanger's letter to the heir of the Procter & Gamble fortune, Dr. C.J. Gamble, exemplifies her disposition toward the black community. It explains the utilization of both a black doctor and minister to coerce the black community into eugenics programs intended to suppress the black population. The minister's work is also important, and also he should be trained, perhaps by the Federation, as to our ideals and the goal that we hope to reach. We do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, and the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members. Hillary Clinton has always maintained a deep and profound admiration for Margaret Sanger, as she clearly states in the following clip.
It was a great privilege when I was told that I would receive this award. I admire Margaret Sanger enormously. Her courage, her tenacity, her vision.
What would you say is the leading cause of death in the black community?
Oh, HIV/AIDS.
Diabetes, cancer, AIDS.
I'll say heart disease. AIDS.
From what I heard, it's probably AIDS, you know.
Probably heart disease. I think heart disease.
HIV. No. Gang violence.
What if I told you the real answer was abortion?
Since 1973, legal abortion has killed more African Americans than AIDS, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and violent crime combined. Every week, more blacks die in American abortion clinics than were killed in the entire Vietnam War. And the largest chain of abortion clinics in the United States is operated by Planned Parenthood.
We have now reached a point in this country that African American women, though they make up 12% of the population, they account for 37% of the abortions. An African American baby is almost 5 times more likely to be aborted than a white child. The abortion industry at this point kills as many African American people every 4 days as the Klan killed in 150 years. And you can truly say the most dangerous place for an African American to be is in the womb of their African American mother.
All across America, you can stand outside of the abortion clinics and see a steady stream of black women coming in and out. But somewhere along the way, We got the idea that this is a white issue or a conservative issue or a Republican issue, and therefore it's not an issue that we have to be concerned about. This same attitude has allowed Planned Parenthood and other members of the abortion industry to carry out this genocide right under our very noses. Right now, in America, about half of our babies are being killed in the womb. And in certain parts of America, more of our babies are being aborted than are being born.
If we want to stop Black genocide, we need to elect politicians who are willing to defund and shut down Planned Parenthood. 49% of unborn infants who are aborted are female. Yet many politicians are quick to proclaim that they are protecting women's rights. What about the 49%? Who is standing up for their rights? When you hear politicians boast about the wonderful work of Planned Parenthood, you might wonder if they have ever bothered reading a history book.
So every day, in every state, in every center that Planned Parenthood operates, there's stories like those. Lives you've saved, women you've empowered, families that you've strengthened. That's why no matter how great the challenge, no matter how fierce the opposition, there's one thing the past few years have shown. It's that Planned Parenthood is not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere today. It's not going anywhere tomorrow. As long as we've got to fight to make sure women have access to quality, affordable health care, and as long as we've got to fight to protect a woman's right to make her own choices about her own health, I want you to know that you've also got a president who's going to be right there with you, fighting every step of the way. Thank you, Planned Parenthood. God bless you.
I believe that we are all in this together. I also believe when it comes to raising awareness, there are a few things we need to look more closely at as a society. 60% of the 2.3 million people incarcerated in our nation are black, equating to a staggering 1 in 3 blacks being incarcerated in their lifetime. It has somehow become taboo to talk about the fact that the implementation of the welfare system and the failed war on drugs contributes exponentially to these problems, which unfairly impact black people at an astonishingly disproportionate rate. According to a 2010 study, 72% of black mothers are not married. Welcome to the new America, post-welfare. Prior to the implementation of welfare laws, which drove a stake through the heart of family structure, blacks had a divorce rate of only 20 to 30%. Without a father figure in the home and the additional stability of a two-parent household, it is also no secret that children are at a far greater risk to join gangs and to drop out of school. Please understand, I am not against welfare. However, it is my contention that a welfare system that radically promotes a single-parent environment in direct correlation to the aforementioned statistics is not much of a welfare system at all. This is why welfare reform that emphasizes keeping families together needs to take place. This same system promotes our modern-day culture wherein black males aged 15 to 34 years, #1 cause of death is not guns, but black-on-black gang-related violence. Guns kill people like forks make people obese. There's more to the story than simply stating an inanimate object is the root cause of the problem. Most Americans alive today, and even at its inception, had no direct input on the welfare legislation and its catastrophic effect on the day-to-day lives of black Americans. Between 1990 and 2009, the private prison population has increased approximately 1,600%, compounding this problem. The fact that the private prison system is incentivized by maintaining a high incarceration level is undeniable. This, in turn, leads to lobbying for longer prison sentences for nonviolent drug-related offenses, which comprise the bulk of black incarceration levels. We're also not supposed to talk about the incentive private prisons have via contracts with large corporations to utilize the prison population as a means of slave labor. Yes, that's right. Some of the largest corporations in America outsource work here in the land of the free to private prison corporations such as Corrections Corporation of America and Wackenhut, now known as Geo Group Incorporated.
Private prison companies may even have a hand in writing the laws that keep their cells filled. The private prison industry has participated in a free market think tank called the American Legislative Exchange Council, or A.L.E.C, that writes pro-business laws for state legislators. At least one executive with the Corrections Corporation actually sat on the committee that drafted Get Tough on Crime legislation.
A.L.E.C has taken a lot of credit for all the laws that have pushed our prison population beyond the capacity of our public prisons, and the Corrections Corporation of America, the Wackenhut Corporation, the organization now known as GEO, which is the second largest private prison company in the world. Both of these companies have participated in A.L.E.C and have made a lot of money off the results of those laws.
It is often cited that our 13th Amendment abolished slavery. However, if we take the time to read the 13th Amendment, we will find the inherent workaround which keeps the institution of slavery alive and well. The 13th Amendment states, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States, or any place subject to their jurisdiction." Oh, there it is. It is subtle, but I believe it states, "except as a punishment for crime." So even according to this liberating piece of legislation, it is evident that there is in fact an incentive to incarcerate people en masse to proliferate slavery. This is the type of awareness that people must be awakened to. It then becomes readily apparent that the private prison systems of today have replaced the plantations of old. Where the slaves of old picked cotton, the slaves of today produce smartphones and other various forms of technology. Our government would never craft such a dark and ominous system of outright tyranny like you propose. They would never dare intentionally harm American citizens, you might be thinking. Tell that to the thousands of black American test subjects of the Tuskegee experiment, which studied the effects of untreated syphilis during the span of 1932 to 1972 under the guise of free health care from the U.S. government. We've talked a bit about incentives, but what about narrative? Who controls the narrative? Funny you should ask, but it's the same people who are supposed to be shining the light of truth on our government and keeping them in check, the mainstream media. It's not a coincidence that more people get their news via television from Fox News than from other major stations combined. People who align themselves politically right of center do not have a national level alternative to Fox News. Inversely, people who align themselves left of center politically have choices such as MSNBC, CNN, ABC News, CBS News, etc. By splitting the viewing of the more liberal-oriented viewer among many stations and unifying more conservative-oriented viewers via lack of choice, this helps to ensure political infighting remains the focus, rather than providing a more accurate representation of our individual rights and views. It forces us into the collective of our broader political affiliations by drawing a virtual line in the sand. Whoa, whoa, hold the phone, Fed Up 24/7. Just drop the mic and walk away. We're not supposed to look at our beloved media this way. We're not supposed to point out that this is intentionally done to ensure that political infighting exists in relative perpetuity. How is this even relevant? Perhaps it's relevant because most people are not aware that the MS in MSNBC stands for Microsoft. Microsoft belongs to Bill Gates, whose father was a former head of Planned Parenthood, just as George H.W. Bush's father, Prescott Bush, was a former head of Planned Parenthood. It's relevant because mainstream media so easily lends itself to the purpose of polarizing the masses. In the disinformation age, polarization equates to ratings. The more controversial a news topic is, the more people will be compelled to watch. This permeates to not only political ideology, but to every core foundation of our very humanity. This polarization agenda of man versus woman, black versus white, Democrat versus Republican, LGBT versus hetero, science versus religion, etc., is used as a vehicle to drive ratings in the name of the almighty dollar. One might go as far as to call it an incentive. There's that word again. So who benefits in this system? The answer is the politically corrupt, the corporate oligarchs, the banks, and the other ruling elite. So in closing, we are all still free to believe what we want to believe. But make no mistake, we are all in this together. The same laws and principles that oppress Black Americans today can be used to oppress the whole of humanity tomorrow. If we truly are to cast off the chains of an oppressive system once and for all, then the awareness of these issues and other issues in their mold must be acknowledged and addressed accordingly. Breaking this cycle will be no easy task. Perhaps it is easier to simply label each and every American as a racist, homophobe, heterophobe, transphobe, or part of the religious right or godless left, and in doing so, maintain the status quo of infighting. The name of the game, after all, is divide and conquer, and it's being played on a field where absolute power corrupts absolutely. What we're witnessing is the oppression of Black Americans being used in a pilot program to usher in global tyranny, which, if remains unchecked, will result in a new world order under a one-world government where all but the elite are slaves. We need to look deep inside ourselves and ask if we're willing to continue to play this rigged game, or if we will unite as individuals, not for the common good, but for the good of all individuals who have a right to liberty, freedom, and independence.